and obviously also through social media. Um, if you're not in Germany, don't despair because we are really worldwide. There are 100 and I believe 150 advising centers in I don't know how many nations around the world. So um, you will have chances to connect with both Cultural Vistas and with Education USA afterwards. On that note, Education USA and also Cultural Vistas are very much concerned with privacy. Cultural Vistas may contact you afterwards. Unless you let us know that you object to that, then we will obviously honor that objection. But more about Education USA, if you're interested, Education USA DE is our website where you can find us. Okay, and that is the agenda for today. Finding internship, tips for a successful application. What is this ominous J1 program thing? The hard things, costs, how to get your visa, and there will be time for question and answer. Okay, and without further ado, finding an internship. Over to you, Will. And also, please forward the slides yourself.
Okay, thank you. So before we get into finding an internship in the United States, I just wanted to say a few more words about Cultural Vista's role as a J1 visa sponsor or sponsoring organization. What that means is that we are accredited by the U.S. Department of State or the U.S. government to ensure that the program, the internship program that you're doing in the United States is related to your field of study, and it consists of a structured training program. So we are basically responsible for ensuring that both you as the student or the intern are adhering to the regulations of the U.S. government, and also the host company is adhering to the regulations of the U.S. government. So it's not actually possible to get a J1 visa without a sponsor or a sponsoring organization. And we're not the only one. There are other sponsoring organizations as well. But just so that you're clear on our role in this, we usually get involved when the students have already found an internship in the U.S. And we have about close to 5,000 students every year who come to the United States to complete internships there, and most of them find internships on their own. So we are usually not involved in the internship placement process or finding the internship, but we have some tips for you here based on our past experience and what our participants have told us. And I can say that starting early is really the key. If you're thinking about going to the United States to do an internship, you're never too early to start the process, because as you'll find out in this webinar, the visa application takes time, finding your internship takes time, preparing everything takes time. So you should really start a few months. I would say 3 or 4 months is a good time to start the process. So you have to plan for not only finding the internship, but also the visa application, which will take a few weeks of your time as well. I always suggest that students, and we'll be gearing this mostly towards German students because I believe the majority of you are from Germany or German-speaking countries. But the students who come from German universities, the best step is to talk to your international office or your career services office at your university, because oftentimes they will know if one of their students has already gone to the U.S. to complete an internship, and they might be able to even provide you with contact to that student or to a company in your field in the United States that may have already had a great experience and may be looking for another student in your field. So always start with the people you know and any contacts that you have in the U.S. Obviously, if you have a network already existing in the U.S. through, for example, LinkedIn, Contacts of Contacts, or Sing in Germany, that's always also a great place to start. Also, you want to do some online research in your field and find out what companies are relevant to your field in the US. And don't always just look for the biggest names or the most obvious companies, but try to also find maybe smaller companies or medium-sized companies that are in your field that you may not have heard of before, but oftentimes provide a really great experience. Because if you're part of a really large company and they don't have a structured internship program, it could be that you're just sort of a cog in the wheel, or you might not be given as much responsibility as you would get if you were working with a smaller or medium-sized company. When you apply to internships, you can either apply to open job sort of postings where someone's looking for an intern. Or you can also, especially at the smaller companies, if you look and find someone, you can send a Initiativbewerbung or just an application without actually responding to a call for applications. But always when you write to a company in the US, it's important to make sure that your materials are targeted to that company and that if there is a job, if it's a job description that you're applying to, that you respond to specific questions or specific language that's used in the job description, that you try to use as many keywords as possible that are used in the job description in your cover letter and your CV. After you've written to a number of companies, and you should really, write to 5 times as many companies as you think. Don't just find the perfect one and write to them and hope that it works out, but really try to apply to a number of different places. Follow up with them also via email or via telephone if you haven't heard anything after maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then usually once a company expresses interest in you, they'll want to hold a Skype interview or telephone interview with you. And then they'll confirm the internship with you via telephone in most cases. And once that happens, then this process of applying for the J1 visa starts. If your host company in the United States is not familiar with the J1 visa, or if they never hosted an international intern before, don't despair, and also tell them don't be too stressed out or worried about it. The visa sponsor, for example, Cultural Vistas, will walk them through all of the steps that they need to make sure that they have everything in line and make sure that they're complying with all U.S. laws. So they shouldn't be scared of the process. We're there to answer their questions and help them as well throughout the process. Okay, so some application tips. As I said, you can look for open job applications on online job portals, but a lot of times if you apply to a position that's advertised online, there will be hundreds or thousands of people applying to that position, and your chances might not be so great, especially if the company perceives taking on an international intern as maybe being more work, which is not necessarily the case, but that might be the impression that they get. So it's always helpful to look on the website and try to find specific people whom you can write to who are relevant for that job, maybe the supervisor for that department or a human resources person who can help you, who's basically responsible for oversight of all open positions at the company. In the US, when you submit a job application, it's standard to only send a CV or a resume, which should be kept to 1 page, especially if you're a student and you don't have that much work experience. Try to trim it down to 1 page, because anything longer than 1 page is really seen as too long, and it'll help you also to focus on the most important things that you're offering and that you're bringing with you. So always keep your CV to 1 page, and write a cover letter, which is a targeted letter to that company about either a specific position or really highlighting your skills and basically calling out anything that's not immediately visible when looking at your CV or your resume. This can be challenging to sort of craft this to each individual position or each individual company, but it's important because if someone's looking through, again, hundreds of applications or maybe even 10 applications, they may just breeze over the cover letter and the CV, and if they don't see things that stand out to them that are important to that position, then they might just pass over you. Especially for German applicants, we get a lot of people who submit Zeugnisse or additional certificates. That's usually not required and not asked for. So if you submit additional certifications, people might look at it as a strange thing and wonder why you're submitting all this extra stuff. If in doubt, rather just submit the 1 page CV and the cover letter, and then they'll ask for more documentation if they need it. On the right-hand side here, we have a few websites that are good starting points to look for job openings. And obviously, if you're in a field like engineering or architecture, there are probably job boards that are specific to your field that you can find more specific job postings. So do a little bit of research online if that's the case. And if you can check out the Cultural Vistas blog, you will also see we have an article on finding an internship in the US as well. Okay, so tips for a successful application. I mentioned this a little bit already, but what's important when applying is that your resume or CV and your cover letter are to the point, short, and professional. And then obviously when you apply, most of the time you'll be applying via email from overseas. So try to target your cover letter and your email to a specific person if possible. If there's someone mentioned in the job opening, then write to that person. Obviously, you want to highlight all of your relevant skills and be confident. In a lot of cases, we hear from HR departments that the international interns are maybe not as confident in their abilities or don't come across as strongly as American applicants, which is just because that's the style of Americans who apply to jobs. They're sort of very confident and expressing everything that they're capable of doing. So it's important that you come across as a strong, sort of self-confident applicant as well. Again, your resume should also be targeted to the company, and be sure to use sort of strong verbs and things that show sort of action verbs, as we say in English, that show what you've done at your past internships or your past jobs. Another important thing for German applicants, you don't need to include a photo of yourself. In fact, you shouldn't include a photo. You should not include your marital status, and you should not include your birth date. These are things that are not typical on U.S. CVs or resumes, and if you include them, it might call attention to your application in a strange way, and they may say, why is this person including all this? We don't want them in our company. If you are in doubt about the format of a U.S. resume, you can look online, just Google it, or there's an example of a website that you can use that'll put it in the proper format. And if you have access to a native speaker, ask them to provide you with spell checking and to look over it and make sure that everything is in order. When you interview with the company, obviously you want to do a little bit of research first, make sure you know a bit about the company, and what's helpful is to also ask some questions that are related to the position or to the company, so that the person that's interviewing you sees that you're serious about it and that you've done your homework and your background information. Um, Again, be confident, emphasize what your strengths are, be prepared to talk about your weaknesses. That's a question that a lot of times is asked in U.S. interviews. And what's important that I can't stress enough is after the interview, always send a very short thank you email, just saying, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I look forward to hearing from you and would love to um, become an intern at your company. Because a lot of times that'll be the difference between getting an internship or not, so we strongly recommend that. Obviously, it's important that you ask questions yourself in addition to questions about the company, such practical matters as, do you need a car? So if you're not in a larger city in the United States, you may not be able to get around via public transportation. And if your host company just has general experience with international interns, a lot of times if they do, they may have ideas for places where you can stay, or they may be an apartment that goes sort of handed down from intern to intern. And a lot of times that the host company providing that additional support can be extremely helpful, especially if it's in a more rural part of the country. So after all of that, you get your internship confirmation, and you feel like $1,000,000. You feel like this guy on top of the mountain, and you think, I've got my internship now. I can go to the U.S. But unfortunately, it doesn't go that fast because that's when the real fun starts, and that's when the application process for the J-1 visa begins. So that after the point when you've gotten your internship confirmation, you've sorted out all the details of your information, that's when you need to get in touch with a J-1 visa sponsor, such as Cultural Vistas, and when you apply for you start the application process for the visa itself. So I think at this point I'll hand it back to Uta, and Uta, you can talk a little bit about the J-1 and what it's all about.
Well, to give it the proper name, that's the Exchange Visitor Program. And what it does, it allows students and also young professionals to enter the United States temporarily to learn about US businesses and culture. So a internship experience in the US under the visa consideration is not considered a work experience, but a cultural and exchange experience. So that is really a very important distinction to make. And because that is a cultural experience, because just working is not permitted, but this cultural and experience, that is possible. But as Will already mentioned, you do need a legal sponsor, and sponsors, that is not necessarily a person, it's in most cases an organization that has been accredited by the US Department of State to organize such cultural or exchange visitor programs. And the exchange visitor program is also like a hold for many different purposes. So going into United States as an intern or also as a trainee, and there are those of who've gone like on an au pair program or have done a high school exchange, you will have already encountered um, the J1 visa, because the exchange visitor program, that is what uses the J1 visa, and it always requires a sponsor organization such as Cultural Vistas. But to give its due, there are a lot more. Today, we are looking in particular at the intern and trainee categories. And Wiebke, you can see here, there above trainee, there's also a category for teachers. And the good thing is, Cultural Vistas, as one of the J1 sponsors, also not only does intern and trainee programs, but they also do teacher programs. And it would be not a bad idea to talk to them. But talking about legal sponsors, here on this J1 Visa StateGov website, you can find all accredited sponsors by the U.S. That are accredited by the U.S. Department of State. And you will find a list. In many cases, you will not find very, in particular, like popular German organization. And the reason behind that is that not many sponsors that are located in the United States do not necessarily have their own offices in every country abroad. So they will work with local organizations. And in order to find out if you have a legitimate sponsor, talk to your local organization and ask them about with which sponsor, legal sponsor, they work in the United States. And if they cannot tell you, you should be really checking again, making sure that you really have a bona fide organization. So this is a very important resource that you can check. The website has also tons of other information about the various programs, including intern and trainee. And the next slide, I believe, will give a little bit of an introduction because we are talking about intern and trainee. In German, it's always Praktikum. And we generally call it internship. But there are a few things that are different between intern and trainee. And maybe, Will, you want to take over and explain that?
Sure. So mentioned here are three of the categories of the J1 visa that Cultural Vistas is able to sponsor. Interns refers to pretty much anyone who is a student, so enrolled at a university or an equivalent post-secondary institution, so post-high school. And this is for students who are either currently enrolled, or you can even start your internship up to 1 year after you've finished your degree under the intern category. So if you're applying for the intern category of the J1 visa, you have to, or you're able to intern for up to 12 months is the maximum that you can do. But again, you can only start your internship up to 1 year after you've completed your university degree. The next category, trainee, refers more to people who have already been out of university for a longer period of time. So maybe who are have at least 1 year of full-time work experience in their home country that's related to their field. And in that case, you can go to the US for up to 18 months. So you're seen as having a little bit more experience, and therefore you're able to do a longer period of training under the trainee category. But I think most of you, if you're enrolled as a student at the moment or during the time when you're going to complete your internship, you would fall into the intern category. Very briefly, I'll just mention the teacher category. This probably doesn't apply to anyone here, but this is if you've already completed your degree and you have at least 2 years of work experience as a teacher. You're an accredited teacher in your home country and you've worked for at least 2 years. This category of the J1 visa allows you to work as a teacher in the United States for up to 3 years, and even extensions after that are possible. Um, if you're studying to be a teacher right now, like if you're studying Lehramt in Germany, for example, this would not apply to you. You would do the intern category, and you would only be able to work as a teaching assistant in the United States because you're not allowed, you're not authorized to teach a classroom or to take the classroom yourself. You can only be a teaching assistant under the intern category. But if you've already gotten your degree and are a accredited teacher, the teacher option is something that's available for you down the road. Uta, do you
Yes,
want to talk about this?
yes. um, the important thing to remember is about your internship. Will already mentioned that you have, well, actually, we haven't mentioned that yet. You must have already studied either at a higher education institution or received professional training when you start an internship. So, unfortunately, for those who've, started in the fall semester, you need at least 2 semesters of study before you can start an internship, because any internship or training has to be related to your field of study or to your training. I believe, Athena, you mentioned that you may want to do something in journalism and you are studying English. So there is a lot of leeway, or some leeway at least, in defining your interest and how a internship might relate to your field of study, but please keep it in mind that there has to be some relationship to that. Also, when you're doing an internship, you have to formulate a training plan. And comes in a form which is called all these wonderful names, DS 7002. And the legal sponsor, such as Cultural Vista, can help you obtain that. But you'll really need to fill that in connection or in conjunction with your employer in the United States. And while you don't have to earn money, it's strongly recommended. Obviously, you do want to earn some money while you're working or while you're doing this cultural experience. And it makes it a lot easier. We will talk a little bit more about costs in the next section. But you should remember that living in the United States is not an inexpensive thing to do. So again, unless you have very good funding from home, it would be really a good idea to get a wage. However, there are a few things that are really not permitted, and you can see casual labor and people who work in the health fields, they pretty much have a hard time because anything that it has to do with patients, with therapy, with counseling, with social work, anything that would require you to give medication, that is really not permitted. Also, you cannot like do an au pair job or work in a senior citizen home taking care of senior citizens. Um, this really has been omitted from the internship program. So if you are in that field, you may have to stick with admin kind of work. Or make sure if it's working in a laboratory where you really do more like research things, but really you need to make sure that all these things that are listed here are not part of what you do. Okay. The role of the J1 visa sponsor, I mean, Will has already started to talk a bit about what they do. But in particular, also the organization determines if the company that you chose is eligible, to receive interns and trainees, and they also need to make sure that you, as students, that you are really enrolled, that if you have already studied that 1 year, um, and that you're really following all those rules. And if you're really interested and want to know, there is a lot of a number of regulations that are really, giving all, in very great depth in legalese language, what a program sponsor has to do, what they have to check on about with the companies and about you. So they really need to make sure that you are that they give you a clear talk, or would tell you in very uncertain terms what you in order to help you, that make it be the medium between you and the program, and making sure it will be a success for you. In particular, one is health insurance. As you may have heard, getting sick in the United States can be a very expensive undertaking, let's say it like that. And you must have health insurance when you're going on a program in the United States. And that is also something that your legal sponsor will check on for you. Some legal sponsors also will offer you internship positions. Um, However, in many cases, you'll find that these are unpaid positions. So it really pays out to really invest time and try to find your own internship position, preferably one that is paid. Also, that makes sure that it really is something that will fit your own personal needs, and is maybe not just any internship that might apply in the broadest way to your field of study, but that really doesn't forward your own goals. So finding that internship is something that can be helpful. Check it out. Again, some organizations will advertise them on their own web pages. Cultural Vistas has this blog that Will has already mentioned. So, but this is something to check out. And a very important thing is issuing a form, that is paperwork, which is the DS 2019. And that is the document that you need in order to apply for the J1 visa, because that tells the consular officer that you have gone through that process, worked with a legal sponsor, they have checked on off on all, that you complied with all the things, and then they will issue this very important document. And on that document, you will also find a lot of helpful information, important information, among them things, how much will it cost? But because a lot of things will depend on your on the location where you're going. So over to you, Will.
Okay, thank you. And in talking on that point again of the DS 2019, that's the form that you need before you're actually able to apply for a J1 visa at a U.S. consulate or embassy. So only once your sponsoring organization or J1 visa sponsor has given you that form, are you able to apply for the visa from the U.S. government and actually get the visa to go to the U.S. So that is an extremely important form, and that basically says that the sponsor has vouched for your training program, that it really is relevant to your field, and is advancing, as we just said, advancing your career goals, and is also relevant to the company, and that they adhere to all the regulations. Here you'll see some, we wanted to put together just an overview of some of the costs, because even if you have a paid internship, the experience is not going to be without its costs to you. And here we have an example for a 3-month internship for a student who would be going to the United States. The cost that you would have to pay just to go through this process of applying for the J1 visa, getting your DS 2019, and getting the J1 visa from the U.S. consulate. So the program fee that covers Cultural Vista's administrative services would be $775 US. And this is just an example from our pricing. Again, prices are different for every sponsor. And if you are doing a 3-month program, then you would pay $70 a month for insurance. I should also mention that you're able with a J1 visa to stay for up to 1 month before your internship start date and 1 month after your internship start date in the United States. So if you said, I'm going to stay for an extra 2 weeks at the beginning or at the end, and add basically another month on, then you would need to account for that month in terms of your insurance as well. There's a fee that the U.S. government charges called the SEVIS fee, which is for a exchange visitor, student and exchange visitor database that basically tracks all of the foreign visitors and people who are in the United States. And this database is sort of a replacement for what we have in Germany as the Anmeldung process, or registering your residence. That doesn't exist in the US, and so this is the way that the US government is able to know who all is in the country, where they're working, where they're living, and what they're doing while they're there. So this is a fee that you have to pay that Cultural Vistas will collect on your behalf and pay on to the US government. But this is a fee that all applicants for a J1 visa or for an exchange visitor visa need to pay. Likewise, once you get your DS 2019 form and want to apply for your J1 visa, you'll need to make an appointment at your closest US consulate or embassy. Um, and if you're in Germany, then you have the ability to apply to a couple of different places. But at each one, you'll have to pay a fee for the consular appointment. And that's when you go in with your DS 2019 and you have an interview with someone from the embassy or consulate, a consular affairs officer, and they determine if your program in the United States is relevant and if they're going to give you a J1 visa. And to do that, you also have to pay $160. So as you can see, even before you've left for the U.S., all of these things can add up rather quickly, and you're already at over $1,300 just for the visa processing fees. Now we've put together, you can see this funky formatted URL here. But if you go to Cultural Vista's website, we'll give you an overview of all of the costs that are related. For example, if you are married and you want to bring your spouse as a so-called dependent while you're in the United States, that's also possible. And if you want to process your visa application or your application through Cultural Vistas faster, there's expedited processing available. So if you go to our website, you can see an overview of all of the fees. Now, as I said, this is just an overview of the cost that you'll have before you leave for the US. And what Cultural Vistas offers for all of our participants is a budget calculation tool that lets you see both your pre-departure costs and your costs once you arrive in the US. So we took an example here of someone who has 3,500 US dollars of their own savings, as you can see in the pre-program savings, and who, for example, get a $500 scholarship from their university. So that they're starting their program with 4,000 US dollars of their own funds. And in all of this preparation for, let's say, spending a 3-month internship, but a total of 4 months in the US by maybe booking 2 weeks at the beginning of their program and 2 weeks at the end of their program of free time, they would come to a total of $2,665 of expenses, including their flight, the consular visit, the SEVIS fee, the health insurance, and their program fee. And from the money that they have left over from that, they would put that towards their living expenses. Unfortunately, this is a little bit blurry and you can't really read it. But the point is that even if you have a paid internship when you're in the United States, so here we have an example of someone who's paid $1,200 a month, and you have some savings of your own, there are still additional costs such as your rent, your transportation, your cell phone, food, etc., that all adds up. And so we say all of our participants should plan on having at least $3,500 of their own money when they come to the United States to cover your visa costs and all of your incidental costs while you're in the US as well, even if you have a paid internship. Again, we have this tool that helps you calculate your budget exactly, and that'll be very helpful for you. And there are also some tools on the right-hand side of the screen here for calculating what's called a living wage based on what city you're living in. Obviously, if you're living somewhere where the cost is much higher for rent and for food, such as New York or San Francisco, you'll be paying perhaps double what you would pay in rent than if you were living somewhere like Idaho or Montana, where you would have a more rural setting. Um, of course, if you're living outside of a major U.S. city that doesn't have public transportation, you may also need to think about having a car during your time in the United States. And again, these are all questions that you'll want to ask your host company when you have an interview with them. But if you decide that you're interested in this, you can reach out to Cultural Vistas, and we can provide you with the budget calculation tool. And these websites are good for seeing just a general rule of thumb for how much it would cost depending on the area where you're looking to do your internship. So, Uta, I don't know if you want to take over here again, or well, I guess I'll continue here. But as I said again, for a successful visa sponsorship application, just as when you're applying for your internship, you want to leave as much time as possible. And we say that you should apply to Cultural Vistas at least 6 to 8 weeks before your planned internship start date. So that means at the point when you come to us, you already have your internship confirmed, your host company has already said yes, and you're ready to submit all of the documents that you need to support your application, such as transcripts that show that you're an enrolled student. And as you see here, if the documents are not in English, we will need official translations of them, and any sort of documentation that your host company needs to provide as well. And in that case, Cultural Vistas will reach out to them once you submit the online application and work with the host company to develop the training plan that Uta mentioned. And that's the plan that shows sort of the chronological phases of your internship and makes sure that you have relevant training and that you are learning something new each week and that they have a structured program for you. Again, be sure to look into your costs before you are ready to book your flight and move to the U.S. Make sure that you understand the cost of the sponsorship, the travel costs, and what your cost of living will be. And when you're discussing your internship confirmation with your host company, make sure that after they've made an offer to you and they say, we'll pay you so and so much a month, that you sort of go back and calculate out, is that going to be enough to cover all of your expenses given how much money you have as well. I also want to say that this seems like a lot of information and this is a very overwhelming process if you're hearing about this for the first time, and the costs can also seem very overwhelming. But it's important that you look at this experience as an investment in your career, an investment in your education, and see that this will pay off sort of down the road. And as I said, we have nearly 5,000 participants who take part in these internship programs in the U.S. Nearly all of them find their own internships in the U.S., and all of them have to make a financial sacrifice for this experience. But we always hear time and again that it's one of the best, if not the best, experience of their life so far, and it can really serve as a great launch pad for their careers. So I know this is a lot of information to look through if you're just hearing about it today, but feel free to reach out to Cultural Vistas with any questions that you have. Even if you decide not to end up going to the U.S. or you decide to go with another sponsor, we're always happy to help you understand the process as well as possible.
Um, the good news actually is there is, in particular here in Germany, there is some funding available. And that also requires that you really start looking into the whole process of internship in the US as early as possible. One of them is the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD. They have like some travel funds that you might tap into. Some universities will allow you to use their Promos funds to um, go to you for an internship, not only for studying in in another country, but they may also be used for internships. And in addition, they may have some funding available at the university level. So really, your your international office, Akademisches Auslandamt, is the place to go. I don't know if there are people from other countries listening in, but also your international office is a very good option. But also talk to the Education USA centers in your country, um, because they may know about funding opportunities beyond studying in the United States. So anything that requires funding, they are a very good resource. So, but that really requires planning and actually may require the process at the legal sponsor, like Cultural Vistas, may only take 3 to 4 months. But if you're trying to obtain funding from a scholarship organization, funding organization, they may have deadlines that are far earlier. So it's really not a bad idea to ask the moment actually you're considering this and check it out to make sure you're not going to miss deadlines. So now that we've talked about the whole process about working with a visa sponsor, you've now gone through the process and they have given you this fantastic form DS 2019, and that's really the place or a very good starting point in order to finally get your visa. That DS 2019, the importance of that document actually cannot be overestimated. Estimated. As you can see, we have highlighted here a number of a few things on that form, even if you cannot really actually read it. But the CVIS number, your program sponsor, program number, and in very important program start and end date. This is a lot of important information that you may need again and again. And once you really have gone through the application process, it still remains important because uh, when you get a visa, the visa only tells you you are permitted to travel to the United States, knock on the door and say, I want to come in. But the DS 2019 is the document that will tell the officer at the port of entry how long you want to stay, what is the plan, the purpose of your visit. So this is a document I can really would like to urge you to keep in a very secure place. Make sure maybe that you have access to a copy when you are traveling. Program start and end date is very important as a thing because we'll mention that you are allowed to enter the country up to 30 days before your program starts. And also you have to leave the country after your program a maximum of 30 days afterwards. And that it doesn't say on the visa how long you're permitted to stay. It's actually the DS 2019 that will give this information. Also on the DS 2019, there is actually, Will, I may have to call you on that because I know on the F1 visa, on the I-20, there is financial information, but I don't recall if it's also if there's financial information on the DS 2019.
Yeah, so you'll when you begin your application process with your visa sponsor, they'll ask you for your personal funds, and that's the amount of money that you have saved up of your own funds. And your DS 2019 will show your personal funds plus the amount that you would be earning at your internship, so that um, that's something that's important for the consular official when you have your your interview, excuse me, at the consulate in your home country, but then also is important when you're entering the country. And you can sort of see that in the middle under number 5, under the blue line.
Okay, um, we are getting towards the end. Got questions? Please ask them now.
And please remember, we can also answer questions in German. If you'd like to ask a question in German, that's fine as well.
Okay, there is a question. Um,
So in
Application
terms
process.
So you're able to
Lashka.
apply for a J1 visa from abroad if you have a permanent tie to the country where you're living. For example, if you're studying in a country that's different from where your citizenship is, then you can apply at a U.S. consulate or embassy in the country where you're living.
Yeah, it's recommended that you have a tie to that country because the consular officer will be familiar with the situation, the educational system within Germany, but may not know a lot about the situation in other countries. So while it's theoretically possible to apply for your US visa from any consulate in the world, it's really highly, strongly recommended that you either have a residency or something here within where you are applying. Jens, a language test? No. Um, the consular officer will conduct an interview in general in English language to make sure that you do have enough language capabilities in order to do what you're applying for, which in this case would be the internship. Will, you have a comment?
Nope, I'm just going to second that. So
I,
when you're applying for when you're applying through your sponsor, they need to ensure, or it's our job also to ensure that you're able to communicate in English and that you're able to conduct a program of training in English in the United States. So if there's any doubt about your English language abilities, it may be that we ask for something like a TOEFL test or something like that, but we can also assess that in interview, either via phone or via Skype. So it's always sort of a call that the officer makes at the U.S. consulate, but the sponsor will also sort of pre-screen you for your English abilities.
Wiebke, about your master thesis. Well, it depends on what you talk about field research. If you're really doing only doing some research in like paper research in a library, things like that, that might be possible on a tourist visa. But there's also something called a short-term short-term, oh God, I'm blanking, short-term scholar. It's also a J1 exchange visitor program category. And I recommend maybe you send us an email. Uh, that's the next slide. So you can send us an email here at info@educationusa.de, and we'll try maybe to help you understand what your options are. But it's possible that if you're, in particular, if you're connected to a US institution, that institution may have to give you the DS 2019 in order to obtain a short-term scholar J1 program.
Exactly. So if you were a short-term scholar, you would get your J. You wouldn't go through a separate sponsor organization like Cultural Vistas. Usually, the university would issue your DS 2019 for that program. About the question regarding database for the internships. So Cultural Vistas doesn't make a database of positions available. We work with a number of companies throughout the country, and we do have programs where we actually provide internship placement services, but those are usually group programs or a program where we have a special agreement with a certain university. So if you want to ask at your international office at your university if they have a partnership with Cultural Vistas, we might be able to provide internship placement services. But as I said, in most cases, most of our interns find their internships themselves. Uta, do you have anything to add to that?
No, no, I
Okay.
just fully concur. Yeah. Livia is asking if there's a maximum what you are allowed to earn. And the good news is no, you can earn as much as you are able to. That is
But
very brief.
that being stated, I should also say that the purpose of the J1 visa is to gain experience in the United States and have this cultural experience, and then return to your home country and apply what you've learned back in your home country. It may raise red flags if there's an applicant who meets with either or contacts a sponsor like Cultural Vistas, or even makes it to the stage of an interview, who's has 20 years of work experience and is getting paid a wage that seems like it should be, a full-time wage, and they want to come to the U.S. for 18 months. Because that could look like to the consular officer like someone is trying to sidestep another category of visa, a category that's more suited to long-term work and full-term employment, and is coming to the U.S. for that purpose. So just be aware of that. Fortunately, it's usually not an issue that people are paid too much for their internships, but if you are a candidate who has more experience and you know have extensive, over a decade of experience in your home country, it should be very clear that your intent when you come to the U.S. is only for this short-term training and cultural experience, and then to return to your home country upon leaving.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's in some areas, in particular social journalism, it may be even difficult to find a paid internship. That is the sad truth. But that's why it also pays to start early, because that really enlarges the scope and the chance of finding something paid. Jens is asking, do I need a return flight ticket before I enter the US? No, you don't, because you have gone through the visa interview process, and you don't have to have a return ticket. That is only a requirement for when you're going on the ESTA under the visa waiver program. It may not be a bad idea if you're only really doing 2 months or less than 3 months, that you have something like a return ticket, but it's not an absolute requirement. Will, have you heard anything on your side on
No,
that?
I think it's just always a good idea if there's any question as to your intent, why you're going to the United States, that you have that return ticket. It shows that your intent is to return to your home country and that you're not trying to get into the United States and then do something else while you're there. The next question
Um,
about taxes. Do you need to pay taxes on your wages? I'm not an expert on this, so I can't say the exact taxes that you are eligible for, but as a non-resident earning money in the United States, you are subject to certain taxes. And I know that Cultural Vistas, my colleagues in the United States, provide a tax software that all of our participants are able to use when they file their tax return or their Steuererklärung the year after they return.
Michael is asking how much savings are recommended for an internship in Silicon Valley. Oh, okay, that's our
Well, Silicon
kind
Valley
of.
is one of the more expensive places in the United States to live, so I would recommend, I'm going to cycle back here through, I'd recommend checking out some of those resources for cost of living, like this MIT livingwage.mit.edu, and there you can plug in the area of the country that you're looking for and sort of see what's a reasonable amount. The amounts can vary greatly, just like in Germany or in any other country. More urban areas tend to be much higher rent and much higher cost of living. I would not be able to say an exact amount. The more, the better, obviously.
I think we got all the questions. Any more? We have a few more moments.
And while we're waiting, I just wanted to mention the fact again that Cultural Vistas, my colleagues in the United States are the ones who work on the Train USA program, as we call it, or our J1 visa program. If you have any specific questions, you can contact that email address there or visit culturalvistas.org/train, and you can read all about the eligibility requirements in much more detail. But our office here in Berlin is also available to answer any questions that you have. Also, if you have questions in German, which I see one came in just now, we're happy to do so as well. Jetzt angerechnet, wenn ein Auto und eine Wohnung gestellt bekommt. So if your employer provides you with a car and a apartment. I'm actually not sure about that. I'll look into it though, Jens, and I can get back to you on that question.
As far as I know, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm um, apologies. I was distracted here for a moment. I believe actually you don't need as much money to show to the consular officer when you're going for the visa interview if the employer states in writing that they will give you a car and or an apartment. So because that will obviously help with the costs. So that is. And Amit is asking, I'm a foreign student in Germany, so it's the same visa process. Yes, it is the same process for anywhere in the world. Again, it's only recommended that you may have like a residence here in Germany or a tie because you're studying here in Germany, so the consular officer can understand why you're applying from here.
If the company offers a job, can I change the visa status in the U.S.? Okay, so that was the point of the comment that I just made is that the purpose of the J1 visa is to come to the U.S. to obtain training in your field and then return to your home country and apply that knowledge. At no point should it be indicated that your intention is to come to the United States to stay for a longer period of time and that you want to work there full time and are just using the J1 to transition into that. That being stated, it is possible. There are possible ways to um, transition between different statuses, as it's called, once you're in the United States. But there are also exceptions to this. So if you receive funding, for example, from either the U.S. government or the government of your home country, there's something that's called the 212B rule, which basically means that you have to return to your home country for at least 2 years before you're eligible to return to the U.S. for any sort of work-related visa or training-related visa. So just keep in mind that if you do receive certain types of funding, it may mean that you have to return to your home country for 2 years before you're able to work in the United States again.
Also, it's really difficult to obtain a work visa for the United States, and it usually takes the employer a lot of time to go through that process. If you're only in the United States for 3, 4 months, it simply may not be enough time during that for you to change the status. And while the status is changed, you are not permitted to do this to start working. So, and to go through it's a lengthy process. It also costs quite some money to do this. So the realities are, that while a change of status to another uh, visas to another visa category, um, in reality, it will hardly ever happen. I mean, in particular for a shorter internship program, I don't think so.
And then in terms
Yen,
of the question about traveling to Canada from Jens, that is allowed you're actually eligible to travel to any country while you're in the United States. But if you want to travel to countries besides Canada or Mexico that border directly on the U.S., you need what's called a travel validation on your DS 2019 form. So in that case, you would get in touch with your visa sponsor, and they would just have to sign off that you're eligible to travel based on what your plans are, as long as it obviously suits the purpose of what you're doing in the U.S. anyway. But Canada and Mexico is not an issue.
Jens, I'm also showing here, this is the visa that is pasted into your passport. Oops. And that actually shows that you are allowed to enter the US multiple times during your program. That is important to notice. Between program start and end date. It's a little bit more difficult to do so during the so-called grace period, meaning before or after the end of the program. So with that, really check with the sponsor before you're planning to do something like that. But within the program start and end date, you can leave as often as you need to. So, and because the J1 is a multiple entry visa, and I'm actually trying to find that little M where it says that you are allowed to, it's too tiny probably here,
It's on the
but
left-hand
it
side.
is, yeah, something, I believe here, yeah, multiple, I believe here, this is the little part here.
Any other
Well,
questions before we wrap it up? Thank you,
well
everyone.
then, yes, thank you for staying with us, having the patience. And remember, you can always contact us if you have additional questions. And we thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.